Joined here today with head coach from Long Beach State, Alan Knipe. Coach Knipe, thank you so much for being here. It's been a long couple days for you. Four days in Toronto with Pac-Man, with We Play, and with Ronan, and now today with Toronto Performance Center. How important is it for you as a member of Champions Unlimited to come all over North America, teach athletes from all ages, all size groups, to impart your wisdom on the game? You've been a part of this game for a really long time at every level, so you've got a lot of knowledge that's being used for these young kids.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I've been in a really fortunate situation for a long time now to be in some great positions, whether it be at Long Beach State or with the national team, and coach all sorts of different incredibly talented players, but I've also coached all levels. And this is my Champions Unlimited camps, clinics, coaching experiences. I want to share that. I don't want to keep it in a vault, and I feel like there's so much good information. Obviously, a lot of it comes from what I've developed with my staff over the years, but also as a lot of it, some of the great coaches I've around has shaped some of the thinking of the way I do some things. I know I present things fairly uniquely, a little bit different than most, and I love that part of it. And I think it's a unique way of sharing volleyball to these athletes, because our job as coaches is to unlock them, is to free them up, is not to give them so much to think about and so many rules to follow that we lock them up. And I think that's really kind of the magic of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to teach very good skills of the game, but the mental side and how to develop some keys, some very simple keys, and then presenting in a way to them that they understand. So I use a lot of different analogies from different sports and visuals that make sense to them, and then explain to them about how they have to stay present in what they're going to do successfully on the next play, because it's a game of failure, so they constantly want to be in the last play. And there is a time for that. There is a time during training, but teaching them some basic keys that they can flood their mind with, of how to pass, how to serve, how to block, whatever the skill might be, and how they're going to approach the very next play, so they can respond after an error really quickly and help their team, help themselves, and not feel so locked and feel so disenfranchised with the sport because they feel like they don't know what they're doing, only because they're lots of repetitions away from the player they're going to be. So what Champions Unlimited allows me to do is take all the camps and clinics that I've been doing for years, put in a real easy format where you can get to us. And it's not just me. I have some great coaches with me. I have Paula Weissoff's been doing some stuff with us on the girls' side. Tim Johnson's done some stuff with us from Santiago College in California. And I got a whole bunch of former players, current staff, former national team guys, and some of the women through Paula that are coming on board with us so we can share this message all over the place. It's not just North America. We've been all over the States. We've been in Canada. We're going to Norway. We've been in Ireland. We're going to be all over the place. And it's a really enjoyable thing to do at this point in my career, to be able to give back.
Yeah. You just touched on a lot. I've been in every one of your clinics. I've heard your message 1,000 times now. And I feel like every time I hear you talk, I come away with something new. Something you touched on there is the amount of reps that these kids are either lacking in, or just the amount of hours that at the youth level compared to overseas, it's just not the same. How important is it for these players to realize that, hey, we are behind on reps. If I really do want to go to that next level, how are we going to get there?
Well, I use golf a lot as an analogy. You've heard that throughout the last couple of days, and that is most people aren't great golfers. Some are, obviously, but people that casually play are not. And then if they play, it can be very frustrating and humbling how difficult the game is, because it's a highly technical sport. And volleyball is no different at that. But players start to play with the expectation they should be good immediately in a sport that takes tons of reps. And I refer to the Outliers book all the time of the 10,000 hour rule, that most of these young players that we're talking to are in that 250 to 900 total hours in their development when they're not going to be at 10,000 hours till they're 25 years old, but yet they're 15 years old and they're super frustrated they're not, an international volleyball player right now. So it's slowing it down. It's explaining that to them that everyone's going to have a different arrival date depending on how many hours work they're putting in. So if I'm a multi-sport athlete playing volleyball only in my high school, I'm not going to get there as quick as, say, a club volleyball player who's not a multi-sport athlete, even though I'm a big fan of multi-sport athletes. I'm just saying that if I put in 200 hours a year versus 900 hours, I'm going to get there significantly faster. But we have to understand that the reason why players are good in golf is because there's golf clubs in their club and they stop at the driving range on the way home from work on a regular basis. They get the reps in, it's intentional work, and then they try to apply it to the game and they keep trying to get better. So the message is to the young players is that, most volleyball players start later in volleyball than they would most other sports, soccer, whatever it might be. So if you're going to start something for boys at 13, 14 years old, maybe girls at 11 or 12, it's still fairly late in your athletic young life, and then it's a little humbling. It's very technical. Your friends can kind of do it, right, and you can do it occasionally. Well, that's where our job comes in. Our job comes in of giving them some visuals that they can see, giving them some clear-cut, keys to help them, give them opportunities to do it, and then critique it in a positive way with them. Maybe show them video, give them some cues that they can tell what's going wrong themselves if they're failing on their platform or how they set the ball, and then continue to let them try and get them to believe that failure is part of it. It's okay, especially in the training part. And that's very difficult for everyone because most of us athletes are very fixed mindset. It's very hard to be growth mindset. So just trying to help. The good thing about being fixed mindset, obviously very result driven, and to be growth mindset, to be open to growing and trying new things and improving, you can make that change. It's not something that's going to stay with your whole life. You can move into the growth world, but you have to have some people that are going to help you identify some ways to do that. And when you get to the point that you can open up a player to become very growth mindset, then they start to really develop, right? They get away from everyone's judging me on this one play, or if I don't pass one good ball, therefore I can never pass a good ball. Yeah. That's not where I want to be.
Yeah. Your messaging has been something that I've been really fascinated with. And you've talked a lot about your sports analogies. You use tennis, you use golf, you use baseball, you use basketball. What is it about framing volleyball in the eyes of sports that they're obviously more familiar with, because those are the sports that are mainstream in North America? What about using those analogies makes presenting these skills
it's
easier?
Because of the visual, really. Whether we like it or not, we've actually seen these sports more. The volleyball is not on TV all the time. We can find it now very easy. We can get online and we can search for it, but literally in the course of our lives, and definitely my life, it's been inundated with major sports. So if we can talk about rotating and arms around pitching a baseball, if we can talk about passing and opening up and clearing the hip like a tennis player, if we could talk about the split step like a tennis player receives serve, or the preparation of like a shortstop body position for defense, those are good visuals because they're good athletic, and a lot of times they've done this before. The other thing is they do it without a whole lot of rules. And one of the problems I think in volleyball is it's filled with so many rules, and the list gets so long of how to pass the ball. Then a player goes from one coach to the next, and it gets longer and longer, and it doesn't get to the point that any of the few that are super important are the keys. It's that we're constantly tweaking and trying, which is okay to a certain degree. But if I use the analogy all the time is in golf. In golf, if the player hits off the tee and it hits a terrible drive into the crowd, and as the crowd opens up to let him play his shot back onto the fairway, the crowd barely opens up because they have tons of faith that his thousands and thousands and way past 10,000 hours, he's going to come in, center himself, go back to his short list, and he's probably not going to have a second bad shot. Whereas in volleyball, the way we coach the players so much is that when they do fail or they question themselves, their list is so long they don't know how to center themselves.
Yeah.
So our job is to help release that stress and to free them up. Therefore, very basic, shorter list, hyper sensitive to the fact that we don't want to inundate them where they can't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
And that's part of the deal. We talk about it all the time with Champions Unlimited and at everything else I've done is we want to shorten their list as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. A big thing for these young kids is the recruiting side, and you've said a lot. Watch the players that are playing now. And you mentioned it in that last question. We have the most access to years and years of volleyball footage. How important is it for these kids to be watching not only our modern day athletes, but the athletes that came before them really established this sport and at the height of volleyball's popularity were really popular?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of volleyball, but I think that I would love to see everybody that plays the sport fall in love with it to the point that they want to be a historian of the sport too. So, you know, my younger son Evan is a baseball player, and he can tell you about, you know, Mickey Mantle or, you know, whoever, right? It doesn't really matter who it was, that, or a pitcher like Sandy Koufax, or right? And he certainly didn't live in that era, but he consumes baseball information. He wants to play and coach, and he knows all this stuff. But you talk to a lot of young volleyball players, and they don't really know much about even what happens after their junior level, how to get to college, and definitely from college, what is out there. Yeah. Because in our country, there's not a lot of professional volleyball. There's some good things happening on the women's side right now. It's really exciting that maybe we're going to see more of that. But in reality, they certainly don't know a lot about the European pro leagues and where you go, or the international game and the Olympics and all that stuff. So I'd love to see that. But in reality, what I want to see more is an athlete try to find an idol or a visual of someone who kind of plays the game like they do, in their body makeup, their size, some of their skill sets. They're obviously their same position, and really dissect what it is that makes them special. Is it their platform? Is it their footwork? Is it their eye sequence blocking? Is it their repeatability as a setter? And really break down and have someone that you want to emulate so that you can have that visual, because we're all visual learners, that we can bring that into the gym, and that's who we're trying to be. That's what we're trying to aspire to be. And then we can get video of ourselves, whether it's through our team, our coach, or our parents doing something, or even setting up an iPad, and we can kind of watch it without overkilling it. We can kind of, I am kind of getting better with my arms, or my platform, my hands are looking better, my platform's looking better. But we don't do that. We teach and we receive information as athletes in this country, almost always through words. And we all know that we're all visual. Yeah. So I'm a big believer that coaches can help their athletes by encouraging them to watch someone who's doing it better than them. If you're a young player, it could be someone at a good high school player. It could be a better college player. It can be a national team player, a pro player. But we owe them to teach them how to watch, because even watching video, you tend to watch the ball and the result of the play. To actually break it down to footwork, platforms, hands, you got to teach them that. Yeah. And they don't have to watch hours of it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of lots and lots of visual. Yeah.
And to end us off, what would you want someone to take away from the work you're doing with Champions Unlimited?
Yeah, I think that what's important is that we want to give back as much as we can when we come to a gym. Because if we come to a small group, one team, or we come to a club and we have 60, or we come to a whole bunch of clubs get together, or we're doing some region work as well, where we have a whole bunch of kids, that's fine. There's going to be systems. We're going to push systems. We want them to understand that. There's obviously all the individual components, breaking the skills down. But the other piece on top of it is the why behind that. Yeah. Why are we teaching what we are in serve receive? Why are we teaching setting? Why these systems? Why these blocking systems? And then we back it all up with the camp plan and all the documentation of the drills we did, the terminology we used, and leaving that with the club director. And it's even better if we set it up where it's a coach's clinic first, right? Where we're coming into town, and before we work with any of the kids, we take all the coaches of the club or all of the region, and we're working with them, and they're gonna work in the camp with us, but we're gonna teach them first of everything we're gonna do, because the consistency of teaching through a common language that you always refer back to, that you can teach in bullets and acronyms and not long paragraphs that change from practice to practice or player to player, and that you can talk to one player loud enough in basic key terminology that the other players can hear, that they can hear, and it helps them. Yeah. This is where we really start to shorten that list, right? So what I guess I want people to take away is that if we did our job right, we came in and we improved the entire product, from the younger players to the older players, the individual to the team, and from the individual coaches' issues they have to writing practice plans to game plans. We want to leave with a complete package. Yeah. Now, it's hard to cover it all, so it meant we might have to come back different times or a few times, or every other year, whatever it is, but that's the fun part, establishing these relationships. Like, obviously, we're doing this interview sitting in a hangar in Toronto, and this has been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Coach, as a third party, I mean, my knowledge of the sport in just this week, I feel like, has doubled. Just being around you, being able to talk with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and be around me for the last couple of days.
I appreciate it. Thanks for what you do for the sport.
Coach. Thank you guys so much.